Mississippi.
From the Foundation Studio, right here on Biloxi's Back Bay. I hope you're having a great day. This is where we celebrate every single Monday at lunchtime the world-class outdoors of the state of Mississippi. And boy, are they world-class. What a great time of the year to be in this incredible state. I want to thank you for joining us on the powerful SuperTalk Mississippi Radio Network, or on SuperTalk TV at C Spire TV. But if you're listening on Facebook or YouTube or your favorite podcast, it's September the 26th, 2022. I hope you had a great weekend. We had a good weekend. We spent some time up at our little family hunting club. We call it Delta Bluffs. I lease 3 separate farms in the Mississippi Delta. And it's that time of year, man. The farmers are beginning to finish their harvest, and we're starting to turn some ground and getting ready to plant some food plots. My biggest observation, actually, about this past weekend is how dry it was. I know I mentioned that last Monday, but I got to see it with my own eyes this weekend. Man, dust clouds all over. Listen, by the way, it's great for the farmers because they're getting their crops out and they're not having to deal with a bunch of heavy rain. So this has been perfect conditions to harvest their crops. We're just hoping now that we get a little bit of rain so we can start to put some seeds down and get the food plots going. But it was a beautiful weekend in the Mississippi Delta. It was hot. For sure it was hot, but it was great to spend some time up there. And then I got home late Saturday, and it was a beautiful weekend in coastal Mississippi. So as I often say, I'm operating from the Foundation Studio right here on Biloxi's Back Bay. And as you know, I've spent a lot of time offshore and doing the backwater fishing or here in coastal Mississippi. And all the reports are incredible, both offshore and backwaters. Just incredible. We've had the reports that I'm getting. A lot related to the weather's been great for fishing. And so, again, world-class fishing here in coastal Mississippi. Hey, listen, I mentioned last week that my son Jordan, 2 weekends ago, was trimming a tree and cut his ring finger. It wasn't a large cut, but it was to the bone, and unfortunately needed to have some medical care. Instead of going to get some care up in the Mississippi Delta, they just kind of packed it up and headed back to coastal Mississippi. He went to Singing River Health System in Gulfport, and they did a great job in the emergency room. I met him there, and he got stitched up and got some antibiotics and a tetanus shot, and looked at it yesterday. Is healing really well. He's got a few more days to go with the stitches, but he'll be fine. But the point is that as I end each show, every single Super Talk Outdoor show, I always say, stay safe when you're in the outdoors. Don't drop your guard. And something as simple as like trimming a branch and having your hand in the wrong place. Jordan said actually that he really thought he had, he said initially he had his hand in the wrong spot. He literally adjusted his hand to a different spot, and the knife slipped and cut through his glove, and the rest is kind of history. But I mentioned that I'm going to invite my friend Chris Gouras, who is on the Foundation board, incidentally, and a really good friend, someone I've enjoyed hunting with and getting to know better. But Chris has a bone-chilling story. Thank God no one was hurt seriously about a mishap that occurred at his camp in the Mississippi River last year. And it's really just another example of when you're in the outdoors, especially hunting or fishing, you have to really pay attention, because the moment you drop your guard, it could really be the end of someone's life. And this is kind of what the show is going to be about today. So I want to invite my friend Chris Gouras to back to Super Talk Outdoors. How you doing, Chris?
Great, Ricky. Thanks for having me. Good to hear you and see you. I know we haven't seen each other in a few weeks, and I know you've been busy in the outdoors. And Kyle, I want to say a special thanks to you for all you do to make this show happen. And it's hard to make Ricky look good, but you do it. So thanks for all you do.
I appreciate it.
Kyle is the man. We're really privileged to have him, and he's been a great partner for me, both for Super Talk Outdoors and my show Coast View here on the coast. Really, really just a terrific partner. I think the world of Kyle, and he is the jack of all trades. That is for sure. Hey, Chris, before we get into sort of safety and the message for today, I want to do a nod real quick to something that's really important. Folks are watching. Hurricane Ian, and we're thrilled here in coastal Mississippi that at least at the point, certainly doesn't look like that's going to be the case. We're not in the cone. The conditions are very much so that it looks like this is going to be a Florida hurricane, but the reality is it's looking like the models were right for many days now. They've been signaling that there will be a major storm in the Gulf of Mexico, and Hurricane Ian has written on it all the makings of a monster, and it looks like it's headed toward the general vicinity of Tampa. Some of the models on that are not good at all for Tampa. I have a very close friend who lives there. My family have family that lives there, and you're from Florida, and of course you have sort of family place there still. And you own a restaurant, and you're actually at the restaurant as we speak, in the just south of Tallahassee is probably the best way to describe where you're located. But tell me about your prep and sort of what you guys are thinking at the state of the situation.
Sure. Well, the important thing, being a Panama City native, no stranger to the tropical systems and storms that come along, and moved to Mississippi in 93, 94 to do government finance work for cities and counties. And of course, you were right there, front row seat to Katrina and the devastation, what most of Mississippians have for most of my hurricanes. And I've done a lot of the recovery work for a lot of cities and counties and utility authorities. And, lo and behold, my brother and I acquire our cousin's family restaurant that sits right out over the water on Ocklawaha Bay, as you mentioned, 30 miles south of Tallahassee. And we've been getting ready for the last few days just in advance. Didn't want to wait till the last minute because there's so much prep that has to be done for this building and where we're at. But knock on wood, we're ready, and what will be, and we'll make a go of it.
Yeah, I had back in my newspaper days, the Bradenton newspaper actually reported to me, so I spent a lot of time there, and of course, since I have family there, I really studied the reality of what a direct hit would be on Tampa. They haven't had a direct hit. Tarpon Springs got a direct hit in 1921, and before that, it was like the mid 1800s. It's very rare, actually, for Tampa to take a direct hit. We're not sure, obviously, that, and in this case, it's going to take a direct hit, but certainly the models suggest that there could be a stalling major storm off the coast of Tampa, and then it's a little bit fuzziness in the models. It could head off toward Apalachicola. It could go on in at Tampa or any point in between. So, but hopefully it will continue to move forward slowly and become weaker, and that's what you could hope for at this stage of the game. But I trust, my friend, you're not going to take any undue risks.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Look, a lot of people depend on you. That is for sure. That is for sure. And since you're in the sort of disaster recovery business, from a finance point of view, you're very gifted in that world, and you'll be, I'm sure, someone that's sought after in Florida, just as you were in Mississippi after this storm, if all of the models turn out to be what they are. So, unfortunately, Florida is going to be under some serious stress if this hits the way we think it might, and they're going to need all the good minds they can get. Yours among them. So, maybe it's a providential in a way that you're in that position that you can contribute in the way that you'll be able to. So, good luck to you, man, and prayers to you.
Thanks so much, Ricky. Thank you.
You bet. So, look, the last time we were on SuperTalk Outdoors together, you talked about your uncle introducing you to the outdoors in Mississippi. And, you and I have had good conversations about your father, who was a charter boat captain who died a couple of years ago. But what a special man he was. He literally tagged, for people who don't, a blackfish or triple tail, there are different names for them, but it's really sought after fish, great eating fish, wonderful sport fish. It's an amazing fish to catch on a fly. But your dad had tagged more triple tail, I think, in the entire Gulf of Mexico than anybody else. So enjoying the outdoors is something that it's sort of in your DNA, isn't it?
It is, Ricky, and it's interesting. We scheduled this call a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't know where I would be at this time, but I'm here, in his condo, right next to where he passed. looking out at Ocklackney Bay, and his neighbor invited my brother and I to fish with him yesterday. Of course, we couldn't go. We're trying to get ready for the storm, but his neighbor caught several triple tail, and he brought us a triple tail. We had triple tail for dinner last night.
Wow, that's incredible. We came up on one tree last weekend, not this immediate weekend, but the weekend before last, and it probably had 30 triple tail on it. You know, it was just incredible. Hey, listen, when we come back, we're going to talk about sort of a bone-chilling experience that Chris and his friends had at their place near Vicksburg on the Mississippi River. And there's a lot to learn from this experience. So we're going to talk to Chris about that when we come back on the other side. We'll see you after this break.
Mississippi to this land called home.
Leading the conversation on Mississippi's outdoors. It's Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi.
Mississippi.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors from the Foundation Studio. I'm thrilled to be here this morning in a beautiful situation as far as the weather is concerned across all of Mississippi. I wish I could say the same thing for our friends in Florida. Chris Gouras, who actually lives in Madison, but he has a lot of interest, both family and business interest, in what will probably be, the target zone of the Hurricane Ian. Excuse me, I wanted to say Ivan for some reason, but Hurricane Ian. Chris is a good friend, and he has a bunch of different businesses, but he loves the outdoors in Mississippi. And as we say on this show all the time, you think about the deer hunting and duck hunting and turkey hunting and fishing off the coast. I mean, this is incredible. But when you get to the Mississippi River, there are some of the most sought after deer hunting land and opportunities in the entire world. And I'm not exaggerating, am I, Chris?
No, sir. And I've been fortunate to be able to, go many places hunting near and far, and always love being in the Mississippi Delta and its beauty and its richness and bounty, and just blessed to be there, and can't wait to watch this storm pass and get back up the island.
Man, I tell you. So, in fact, I wish we'd have spent a whole hour together, but we only have one more segment, this segment together. But you just returned from Africa. You've had some terrific hunts down in Argentina just this year. So you're an outdoorsman's outdoorsman. But Chris, let's take a step back for a second. And, what you and Bo have up in the Mississippi Delta is just a special place on Kings Island. And you have, just like every other sort of, private, situation like that, you're just for family and friends, and you enjoy some wonderful times in the outdoors. And you had one of those wonderful times in the outdoors. In fact, I posted a video you took not long before this incident where two bucks were fighting and you guys were ground level, and it was an epic fight. I mean, it got viewed, tens of thousands of times. And then after that, things kind of went to hell in a handbasket. Why don't you kind of pick it up from there? Sure.
And, Ricky, I don't know that I've ever been involved with something where, the highest of the highs to the lowest of the lows in minutes. It was unbelievable. So I had a good friend from Tallahassee bring his son, who's 19 years old, and they visited when he was 10. And we had a great hunt at Horseshoe, where you've been many, many, many times. And the young man killed a couple of does on his first deer hunt. Fast forward, we bring him back to Mississippi, do some duck hunting for a few days, and then on the tail end of their trip, we're at Kings Point in a stand together. Beautiful cold morning, and we witnessed the buck fight from the stand. We get down, we get to within 30 yards of these deer, watch them fight for 3 minutes, and we're fortunate enough to be able to take the bigger deer point blank range, 25 yards, and just the most incredible hunt ever. And we get back to the camp in the skinning shed, and they're packing up to go home to Florida, and the young man's asking if he can help skin the deer. I'm like, we got it. You go get ready, pack up with your daddy, and my friend who had accompanied them from Tallahassee, and we'll take care of the deer. No worries, we got it. And trying to be helpful, he asked, well, can I do anything? Can I take the stuff up to the house? And so he grabs my backpack and my father's gun that I had loaned him, and goes up to the house. And moments later, I hear the gun go off. I hear a discharge. And of course, that's, never a good thing when you're hearing guns go off and you're not hunting. I make my way up to the porch, and he's on the back porch with the gun and says, I was unloading it. It went off. And a minute later, wasn't a minute later, a second or two later, my friend comes out. The other gentleman comes out the back porch from the mudroom and says, I've been shot. And we loaded him up, crossed the ferry, got to River Region Hospital in Vicksburg. He was struck in the back of his thigh, middle of the thigh, and, CAT scans and x-rays and all that good stuff. The bullet had lodged very close to his femur. They decided to leave it. It was actually a fragment of the bullet. They decided to leave it in him, and he, made an incredible recovery. Just a few days later, he was working out and hopping rope and all that. Just an absolute miracle that the outcome wasn't much worse. But some of the takeaways, when we shot the deer, I made sure the barrel was clear. But as a bolt action gun, there were rounds in the magazine that I left in the magazine. Coulda, shoulda, fully unloaded the gun right then and there, and we're not having this conversation. We get to the skinning shed. There was, no bullet in the barrel. But when the young man went to unload, which he could have just put it on the gun rack and not unloaded it, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. He cycled the bullets out, and on the second one, it went off. So he could have dropped them out the bottom of the magazine instead of cycling them out. We're not having this conversation. There's so many different opportunities there. So there are many opportunities to have avoided that. And the neat thing, and I'll bounce around a little bit because I really haven't given this a whole lot of thought other than the fact we were going to have the conversation. But as I share that story with people, it is amazing how many people say, well, let me tell you what happened to me, or let me tell you what happened to my dad, my brother, or what Joe did at the camp. And I really encourage people to talk about this because at the end of the day, just the thought of it, if it makes someone double check a gun one time, and that's one more accident that, we can avoid, someone that doesn't get hurt, it was an absolute miracle that we didn't have a worse outcome than we had. But the young man was in the mudroom. The bullet went through a table twice, through a wall, hit a safe in the adjoining bedroom, skid across the face of the safe, and a fragment of it lodges into the back of my friend's leg, who was probably 8 feet away from the muzzle. But thank the Lord, he was, there was a wall in between them. Had the young man been pointing the gun up and it went off, no problem. Pointing it down and it went off, no problem. But, he was holding it waist high, parallel to the floor. And there was our outcome. So the biggest thing is just encouraging people to be extra careful, extra safe. And what I appreciate you having me on for is just hopefully this conversation brings it to awareness. We're heading into gun season. We're just a few weeks away from, folks entering the woods all across the state with high-powered rifles. And whether it's a rifle or it's a shotgun, or a BB gun, let's just be aware.
So, Chris, I mentioned to you actually not long before this incident, a friend of mine had a loaded. He didn't realize that it was loaded, but it was loaded. He meant to put it in unloaded, but it was loaded in the back of his truck. He reached in to get something else out of the truck. The gun shifted, and the gun went off. I mean, he wasn't holding the gun; it just shifted and hit something, went off and blew a hole out the top of his truck. If somebody had been standing there, I mean, you just imagine all these possibilities. When you do have conversations with people about these kinds of incidences, you're right. It seems like everybody's got something in their past that they can recall where a gun went off or someone was in the wrong place at the wrong time or whatever. And what it reminded me to do, we've got a rule. I know you guys had this at Horseshoe as well, but we had a rule that says, before you enter the driveway of our place, your gun needs to be unloaded. Don't leave your gun in your truck, because we can't be sure that your gun is unloaded if it's in the truck. Bring it out, rack it in the camp, and when you come into the camp, you have to have the breech open. The breech has to be open. If you find a gun that has an unopened breech, point the gun to the ceiling, open the breech. and then we'll have conversations about whose gun that was. But there are some things you can do that can you can't be overly safe on this deal, can you, Chris?
Absolutely not. And, you just sometimes take things for granted, unfortunately, because you're so accustomed to handling guns and being around guns. And of course, here, we had a young man who hunted when he was much younger. And, I spent 3 days in a duck blind with him and 3 deer hunts with him, and never witnessed anything that he did that was unsafe or concerning. Never once had to correct or reprimand or, hey, point it this way, point it that way. But just in the blink of an eye, we shot the as nice and beautiful buck as you'll ever see. And then, an hour later we shoot my best friend. So,
and you know what, some divine intervention here. I've seen where that went through the wall and where it hit the safe, and where those different fragments went after it hit the safe and the wall. Very scary. But there's some people listening to this show today that know people that weren't so lucky. And because you always remember that the end game for this particular story could have been absolutely tragic. And we don't want it to be tragic for you. So please take this story in and welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. I really enjoyed that conversation with my friend Chris Gouras. We ran out of time, unfortunately, but one of the things that he was talking about was how successful the foundation really worked so hard on the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund, and the fact that the Board of Trustees has now been appointed and they're all coming together. It's exciting. It's exciting that we're moving in a direction that can put Mississippi in a position where they're leading in this area again, and will have generational impact for many, many years to come, spending millions and millions of dollars and creating a fund that can be matched by the federal government so that we can leave a legacy for our kids. That's super exciting, super exciting. And again, our prayers are out to the people of Florida and Chris and his family and his business interests over there. I have a brother-in-law that lives in Tampa, and other very close friends that are there now. So we pray that they don't have to take what the forecast is saying they're going to have to take as it relates to this hurricane. So now let's move over and bring my friend Anthony Ballard. He's a nuisance species program biologist for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. He was back on the show, and he was on the show, back in January. And we had a terrific conversation about their nuisance program at the department, and also the wild hog trapping that they were going to do when we talked last January after the season was over. So I'm looking forward to getting an update from him. So how you doing, Anthony?
Doing well. I'm on the back porch, man. I'm just enjoying a little bit of this cooler weather and hope it holds up. This time of year, you never know.
Yeah, that is for sure. I was up in the Delta this past weekend, and it was dry and warm, man. Or let me put it another way, it was dry and hot, which I know our farmer friends are loving it because they're getting a chance to harvest, and really good conditions for doing that. I'm sure that's what you're hearing as well.
Yeah, and in the Delta, for some reason, it always seems hotter than everywhere else or colder than everywhere else, depending on what time of season. There's just no in between, man.
That's right. I mean, we got up. It was in the low 60s Saturday morning, and it was baking, by noon or 1. So that's just typical, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it doesn't take long.
So last time we visited, we talked a little bit about your past. We won't go so much into that, but you went to Mississippi State, but you also spent some time. You got your master's degree from the University of Louisiana in Monroe, and you spent some time actually with the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries from 2012 to 2015, and then you came back over to Mississippi and became an employee for the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks back in 2015. And you represent, like so many of the people that I've had on the show. First of all, good guy, easy to talk to, someone I enjoy spending some time with. But we are lucky, and I just think it's important to constantly remind people of this. The number of dedicated professionals that work in the department in all walks of life, it's pretty amazing that you got some great people that you work with, don't you?
Absolutely. And a matter of fact, you share that story about my history. I remember I was either a senior or junior in high school, and William McKinley, who is still to this day a good colleague of mine and our deer program coordinator, we chatted it was an extravaganza, I think, in Canton or Madison, somewhere like that. And I was a high school kid. I knew what I wanted to do, but didn't know exactly how to get there. And I still remember the conversation that we had of him kind of mentoring me in those, 45 minutes or so that I took up of his time, to kind of guide me, to tell me, do's and don'ts, just kind of overall things that were going to form where I am today. And, so that's one thing that I always try to do is invest in, kids coming up that want to do the same thing that we do, and, appreciate those that have gone before and kind of laid that path ahead of us. And so it's really a unique thing where you have people that you will not meet anybody in our bureau that's not passionate about what they do. And that's something that it shows in the work that we do, and it shows in just everyday, everyday work, everyday tasks.
Well, regular listeners of Super Talk Outdoors knows that really well, because they share their passion here on this show. And William McKinley among them, man. He's been on the shows numerous times. The work that he's done in the white-tailed deer program from Mississippi, and the collars that they're putting on, the GPS tracking that they're doing, man, again, they're learning some incredible stuff. But I can see how a young Anthony Ballard could be influenced by somebody like William McKinley because of his passion for what he's doing.
Yep, absolutely. And it's, it's just one of those things where you just, the only thing you can do is really just take that and say, okay, I'm going to pay that forward and pass it down to somebody else whenever I get an opportunity to,
It's true, man. You're doing generational work, and that's why, when I talk about Mississippi being the capital of the outdoors in America, we didn't get here accidentally. There's a lot of people in the trenches at the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, biologists and conservation officers and, program leaders and so many different types of programs that are designed to increase our ability to enjoy the outdoors today and well into the future. We want our kids and our kids' kids to have the opportunity to have the incredible resources that we have access to. And we didn't get there accidentally. We just didn't get here accidentally. It takes a lot of hard work, a lot of research, a lot of work. And frankly, the work that Anthony Ballard's doing in the nuisance species program is among some of the most important work. And I'm not overstating that, am I, Anthony?
Everything kind of fits together to achieve that goal of conservation. Conservation is one of those words that's overused in the outdoor community, I think. But when you understand what it really means and how everything fits together and works, it's one of those things where, William McKinley, our enforcement guys, our fisheries, the museum, that everybody has their own cog, their own notch, and that makes the whole machine of conservation work. So it's really a cool thing to be a part of.
Hey, so listen, we'll get into some specifics about how the hog program is going, the hog trapping program is going, and whatever else you want to talk about. But before we get into that, kind of get people an overview. When we talk about a nuisance species program biologist, what do you do on a daily basis?
So I'll go back to the original job that I had, or I guess how that job came to be. So Ricky Flint, who's probably, I'm sure he's been on the show also. At the time, before I came on, he was the nuisance, fur bearer, and alligator coordinator. So he had all of those things under his purview. And as wild hogs became more and more of an issue, more of something that required more and more time, the agency decided at that point, this was back in 2015, to kind of segregate that out and make it its own position, because there was enough work there to have another full-time trained person on that. So meanwhile, you mentioned that I'd spent some time in Louisiana. So basically, I had graduated from Mississippi State in 2012, went to University of Louisiana at Monroe, and then I was doing hog work and some disease work and stuff out of the Baton Rouge office there. And so I was actually building, and my graduate project was also with wild hogs. And so I was kind of building all that experience. And so when I came back, the position that they were looking for, to concentrate on wild hog issues, was something that I had been preparing for without really knowing it for the last 3 years. And so it's, I can't call it a coincidence. I think it was somewhere that I was supposed to be. But anyway, fortunate to be here, and have kind of been able to take this program and make out of it, where I think it needs to go. It provides a lot of freedom, and it's something that I've really enjoyed kind of learning along the way, as I've gone.
Well, if we weren't aggressive with our wild hog management process, they would literally take over. There's so much great science out there about how bad it could be. It's tough now, but can you imagine if we didn't have the trapping program and all the other efforts to try to control it? And this is one of those programs, and there are many like it, where it's just not a public land project. I mean, you're talking about between 80 and 90% of the land in Mississippi is privately owned. So you've got to aggressively be engaged in private lands in order to have any impact whatsoever. So you guys have designed this really massive plan, and you've had a lot of success, haven't you? We're getting close to the end of this segment. You can start now. I'll let you know when we need it. We'll pick it up on the other side here in just a second. But you've had a lot of success, haven't you?
Sure. So what we do is provide technical guidance, and then Mississippi Department of Agriculture and Commerce has really stepped up to the plate with their trap lending program. And so between the two, it's been a really good thing on private lands. Like I said, I get to provide information of exactly how to trap, because we know it's the best way, but there's definitely a methodology that you need to follow in order to make that happen the best way it can. And to be effective doing it.
We're having a conversation with my friend. This is his second appearance on Super Talk Outdoors, and we'll have him again in the future because he's a good guy. His name is Anthony Ballard. He's a nuisance species program biologist. When we come back, we'll talk about the process for trapping hogs. And if you missed our last conversation, we'll also talk about advancing technology and how it really kind of helps this process along. We'll see you after this break.
Now that's Mississippi. A Gulf Coast sunset and a Delta dawn.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. I have my friend Anthony Ballard. He's a nuisance species program biologist for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. I've had the Commissioner of Agriculture on before, and he and I have talked about hog trapping as well. But the truth is, in order to do this effectively, it's got to be a collaborative effort, doesn't it, Anthony?
Absolutely. There's you've got MSU Extension, you've got Agriculture and Commerce, you've got Wildlife and Fisheries, a lot of different private organizations out there, and like I said, even in the wild hog world, there's every part of it's important, because you have MSU Extension and a lot of other universities that are doing research on things that we put into practice as an agency, as a regulatory agency, or as a technical guidance aspect that we've used from that research in order to put in play. And that's kind of how that all comes full circle, is you get the information and then you actually use it and put it out on the field, to kind of put that all together.
So people don't actually apply to get traps from the department. They do that through the Department of Agriculture. Is that right? Right.
So I think I want to say it was 2020 that they first launched that program, maybe 2021. I forget exactly, but Mississippi Department of Agriculture and Commerce are the ones that actually do the trap rentals. And I think they're, the last time I checked, right around 20 to 30 traps that they rent out. You fill out an application. There's a few requirements that you have and agreements you sign. But essentially that's what that is and how it works. But then, like I said, we provide technical guidance. And then also we're developing a survey method that will hopefully complement that allows either someone on private land or public land, really any property, to track over time what you're actually doing with those traps. And I think that's one of the things that has been missing in wild hog management. People, whether it be federal agencies, government agencies, or private individuals, Farmer Joe on his farm, you trap 100 hogs. Okay, great. What does that mean? Where are you going? Where have you been? And I think that's something that's really missing. And I hope what we're developing with our agency can actually kind of be a complement to everybody that's engaging in that management to track it over time.
Anthony, one of the things that Andy Gibson, the Commissioner of Agriculture and Commerce, said to me is that in this collaborative effort to try to control hogs, everyone continues to be amazed that you can take out a very high number of hogs, but their ability to backfill almost immediately is unbelievable.
Yeah, so there's basically two reasons for that. Number one is wild hogs are the most prolific large mammal in the North American continent. So you're looking at an animal that can breed up to twice a year in ideal situation, and can also are going to have an average of 4 to 6 piglets per litter. And so when you do the math on that, you can imagine how quickly, they can breed, it has to do more with weight, but right around 6 to 8 months is when those shotes breed for the first time. And so when you take all that into account, yes, it can be a big problem. And then also, I've talked to many people on their private private property, and let's say it's 40 acres or so off the Pearl River, and that's all they own, and then nobody around them is doing any trapping, and it's like, what do I do? And you have to tell those people, like, man, I don't know, because you're constantly, no matter how many pigs you take off of your property, you're constantly going to be filling in. You're just creating a vacuum. And so it can be definitely problematic. And that, again, going back to that collaboration, that's the reason why that's so important, is because this poor guy's spending, hundreds or thousands of dollars on traps and on bait and trying to solve this problem. And everywhere else around him is a house fire, and he can't do anything about it. And so
unbelievable. Hey, we mentioned before we went to break that technology really has enabled the trap effectiveness. It's pretty awesome how that's advanced, isn't it?
It really is, and it gives you a level of control that you wouldn't have. You just can't get it any other way. The kind of the old style, I guess, and people still do this and catch a lot of hogs, but would be to put a corral trap and then some type of manual trigger where the hog has to actually manipulate something inside the trap in order to make the doors close. But the way the technology's progressed now, my wife isn't a huge fan, but I can lay in my bed and trap pigs, and that's something that hasn't been around for very long. But, once it came online, it was a complete game changer in the whole trapping, because you're never going to trap anything that you don't intend to. And you can make it work with your schedule. In my case, with our personnel, and it just gives you a level of control that you just can't get any other way.
Anthony, we have less than a minute left, but just real quick, we can't drop our guard when it comes to hog management, can we?
Absolutely not. And I talk to people all the time on deer camps and that kind of thing, and it's like the 3 years or so where you progress and they see more and more pigs, and it's like, you should have got to these at year one. Like, when you see the first pig on camera, that's the time to start management.
For sure. Hey, listen, Anthony, it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you this morning and remind people how important it is to control the hog population on their land. If we all work together on that, we can make an impact. So anyway, it's a pleasure to spend some time with you. Have a good day and good week, and we'll see you soon, my friend.
Yes, sir. Sandy, good and good work.
You bet. This has been Anthony Ballard from the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks. Have a great day. Have a great week. We'll see you next Monday. Stay safe. Stay safe when you're in the outdoors. God bless you.
I'll carry on, Mississippi.